Did you think it was important to speak to young adults about this time, this era?
Growing up, I read a lot of history, and I was always fascinated by one of the deepest riddles of that time is how could something like Nazi Germany happen to a country that, like Germany, that is has a deep, long, rich heritage. It's a culture of music and art and literature. And what are the steps that would have to happen? Was it sudden? Was it gradual? Was it a series of small compromises that each person had to make in order to live with this on a day-to-day basis? And then suddenly that accumulation of compromises, there's no going back. You're in it. You're compromised. And that's actually sort of what happens to the people surrounding the protagonist. They have to make their choices, what to live with, what not to live with, and whether to resist, whether to acquiesce. And it's when you're dealing with a small group of people in a closed environment like a Zeppelin. First of all, if you're young, Zeppelins are very cool and very exciting. So, and the protagonist drives a motorcycle, so there's a lot of mechanical activity to attract kids. But at the same time, you can tell a bigger story using this smaller setting.
Wonderful. Well, I know that the story focuses on the experiences of non-Jewish Germans.
Yes.
That's very interesting to me because every story that I've read, at least in this era, it's always been about Jewish individuals living in Germany.
Yes.
Why was this?
Because I wanted to talk about a side of the story that hasn't been touched on as much in young adult literature. And there are some exceptional young adult books about the Jewish experience, the Holocaust, and before the war, during the war. But there really wasn't a lot about people who were watching their Jewish friends going through something that they themselves had to choose to decide, am I going to help my friend? Or am I going to protect what little I have and let my friend and sacrifice my friend?
Right.
That's a story that's incredibly wrenching in its own way.
So in other words, you're saying that people who surround friendships of those who are Jewish are going through the same type of experience or are affected in some way.
They're obviously not, they're not suffering to the extent that the Jewish Germans,
right?
But the compromises, the choices that they had to make when they watched their neighbors' shops get their windows shattered, or they're being told by people not to shop somewhere, or their neighbor suddenly disappears and they don't know where. To have to decide, do I make a stand? How do I respond?
React? Yeah.
It's a timeless question that I think it's not unique to. It's a question that many generations in times of upheaval have to face.
Yeah, because not only are we talking about this era in the 30s and 20s, but we're talking about civil rights,
absolutely,
and the slavery,
exactly.
blacks, whites. I mean, it's happened again.
Right. When you're at home and you're watching something happen on TV that could be down the street.
Right.
You're watching people being arrested. You're watching people marching, and your heart says, "I'd want to be out there marching, but if I do, people are going to burn my house down."
Right.
There
are many, and you know what? It's very. I like that. It sparks a lot of conversation because I'm sure that. During the time of Dr. Martin Luther King, for example, he surely had white supporters. But again, that compromise, that line,
exactly.
Where would my family be if I step out there?
Yes.
So very interesting that you would put that in this book in some sense. Yeah.
The idea is that I don't think you're ever too young to think about those kinds of moral questions.
Right.
They're character forming questions.